I'm not going to talk a whole lot because I like to listen to Bob tell these fabulous stories, but I just wanted to let you know that I met Bob, I guess it was in the late 80s or early 90s when you moved back to Dallas. 94. And I was introduced to him by an old gentleman, a good friend of both of ours, Dale Berry, who was a director, writer, producer, actor. In fact, he had a recurring part on Walker, Texas Ranger. And I worked with Bob on three projects. I worked with him on Painted Hero with the White Yoakum. And then the second thing we worked on together was Walker, Texas Ranger. And he was actually one of the main stars of it, along with L.Q. Jones and Stuart Whitman. And then we worked on a thing here a while back that Mr. Stelzig over there directed called Old Rodeo, The Legend of Red LeBeau. And that was kind of interesting. We can't wait to see that, right?
Yeah. We had a lot of fun out there.
Yeah, we were out at the Cotton Gin. If you've never been out to Cotton Gin in Maxwell, next time they have a big event, head out there because it's a great place. They've shot some music videos out there with Kevin Fowler. They've done some...
got a bull riding.
Yep, they've got a bull riding out there. And we actually did a OK Corral reenactment here a while back that was kind of interesting. But anyway, I'm going to let Bob tell a little bit of his stories. And I wanted to mention one thing. On September the 1st, it's a Thursday night, Mr. Bob Hinkle is going to be on the stage at the Paramount Theater. They're showing Giant, which was, Bob was the dialect director on that. And they're showing that, and it's going to be good to see it on the big screen. And that's Thursday, September 1st. And if you get a chance, come on out there because it's going to be fantastic. Because Bob's going to tell you more stories about Giant.
And it's free that night.
Well, it's free to film fans. If you're a film fan of the Paramount, you get in free. I think it's, I forget, $10 a head, something like that. But
$7.
It's well worth it just to come out and listen to Bob talk about Giant. So Bob, tell us some stuff about your career.
Well, I tell you, it's really something. An old boy from West Texas who quit high school in the 10th grade and got a GED in the Air Force. And the way that came about, I was getting tired of high school, you know. I figured I knew more than those teachers up there, and it was getting boring as heck to me. And I'd always been preached, you gotta have a high school education. If you don't have a high school education, you can't go to college, you can't get a job or this or that. And none of my kinfolks, I mean, any cousins, uncles, nobody had. I was higher in high school than they'd ever been. And so I was determined to get a high school education, and there was a recruiter from the Air Force came out there. Well, it was the Army then, Army Air Force. And he was talking, and I said, well, I would love to go into the Air Force because I'm a pilot and I fly right now. And I said, but I want to finish school. He says, I can get you a high school diploma in 2 or 3 months. I said, really? And he said, yeah. He said, we've got some correspondence courses now, and says you take them courses and pass them, and they'll give you a diploma that said you go to college on it. It's as good as any high school diploma you could get. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. Well, I went right in the Air Force, and I went in to be a pilot, and I did. I scoop it up over here and pilot over there. You know, and so that was a start, you know, of getting me out of West Texas. But what I'm getting at is I ended up going to Hollywood without any credentials and was lucky enough to make it and stay out there 50-something years. And you know, usually when you go in there, you come off of a play up in Broadway, or you're an All-American football player, baseball player, world champion cowboy, or something like that. But I didn't have any credentials, and I'm really lucky. And I'd like to live it over again. I had some tough times, but man, I'd take the tough lines again, really, right along with the good ones. because I remember the good ones a lot more. And I've been fortunate, had a lot of fun. It's nice to be able to do something that you really enjoy, and I couldn't wait to do, when I first started in 1952. They was doing a lot of westerns. I couldn't wait to get up the next morning when I'm going to go work on Gunsmoke or one of those TV shows where I get to wear a pistol and ride a horse and shoot Indians and stuff like that. And it was, you know, because I would have liked to live back in those days when you wore a gun and rob banks and shoot people and things. But I've been shot a lot of times, and I've shot a lot of people. I've been in several jails and several penitentiaries, and it's a good experience, you know. I mean, when they throw you in jail in a movie and they shut that door, you know, you sit there and you just, well, at least I did. I thought, now that, you know, if I'd really robbed a bank, this is where I'd end up, and think about being in here for 20 or 30 years. So it kind of took my mind off on the outside of robbing any banks or shooting anybody, you know. But I loved that, you know, atmosphere of being there. And I was lucky. I got on a lot of Western movies, a lot of Western stuff. It was real popular back in my first few years. And then I got on a picture called Giant, and that was kind of a turning point in my career. I guess y'all probably know how I got on Giant, don't you?
Tell us again.
All right. I went up, I was with an agency there called Famous Artist. And it was the same agent that Rock Hudson was with. And they had first shot at every part on Giant by letting Rock be in there. Well, the head of the agency said, go through our roster and find out everybody that we've got from Texas, send them out there to see George Stevens immediately. Let's see how many we can get on there. Well, my name came up real quick from Texas. And I was I think probably one of the very first people to go out to see George Stevens, the director, out at Warner Brothers. And I know when I come in there that he sat there and I told him what I'd been doing and things, and I know he said, oh man, why would they send somebody like this out here now? He was casting out the leads. And he told me, he said, Bob, he said, I want to be honest with you. He says, I'm just casting and concentrating right now on the leads. He said, I'd like to see you in about 30 days. He says, I'm not telling you that now to just get you out of here. He says, but there's some smaller parts in here. I want you to come back in about 30 days and see me. I said, okay, thank you. And I left. I get a call the next morning to go back and see George Stevens. And I thought, well, it was at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I thought, that's a mistake. I said, that's just a carryover from yesterday. And the lady up there, I called the agency. She said, no, Mr. Hinkle. She said, I took the call, and they want to see you today. It's important. So I said, okay. So I go back out to Warner Brothers. This time, George Stevens, the secretary there said, had one of those. They didn't have intercoms like they do now. It had an intercom, but it wasn't hooked up on your telephone like it is now. And she said, Mr. Stevens, Mr. Hinkle is here. And Mr. Hinkle, I don't remember if I'd ever even been called that in my life. Anyway, here he comes out there, boy. And, hey, Bob, how you doing? And he shakes my hand. And he says, come on in. He said, and he told her, he says, get Fred Gill and Henry Ginsberg over here immediately. Well, I knew who they were. That was the executive producer and the writer. So I said, oh, I'm going to do Jet Rink. I said, boy, I'm perfect for it. I'm a cowboy. I know how to ride a horse, you know, and things like that. And anyway, the first time I was in there, he never did even get up from his desk. I had to lean over his desk and thank him and shake hands with him. This time he didn't even get behind the desk. He sat down, he pulled a chair up by the side of me. How you been doing, Bob? How, you know, like we was old buddies. Then here comes Henry Ginsberg and Fred Gill in. He said, this is the guy I was telling you guys about. I go to hyperventilating. Oh, my damn heart is going like this because I know now that I've got the part. I know it's a deadlock cinch because I'm perfect for jet ring. That guy named James Dean, he's too small, and he's from back east someplace. You know, what the hell does he know about being a Texan? Anyway, George says, Bob, do you think you could teach Rock Hudson to talk like you do? And I said, what? He said, you think you could teach Rock Hudson to talk like you do? I said, hell, I've been trying to get rid of this accent. I've been going to Lester Luther, that's that old boy's name. Lester Luther to try to lose this accent. He, oh no, don't do that. He said, if you can teach Rock Hudson to talk like you do, he says, I'll put you on the picture for the whole run. I said, I can teach him. I said, I guarantee you I can teach him. So he gets on the telephone. He calls Rock. Rock's doing a picture over at Universal called Battle Hymn. And he said, Rock, I got Bob Hinkle here, the guy I was telling you about. He says, could I send him over and let you talk to him? And Rock said, oh yeah, I'll send him right over. So he tells the girl out front, says, get a car up here for take Bob Hinkle over to Universal. Clear him over there at the gate and everything. So I go outside and here comes they didn't have limousine stretches like they have now. They just had them Cadillacs that was a little longer than a regular car, but it had two little seats that dropped down if you want to carry more than 3 or 4 people in it. And I said, well, I guess that's my car. And this guy with a black suit on and a little hat gets out, and he's running around here, and I just open the door and I start to get in. And I wonder, what the hell was he in such a hurry for, you know? And I get in, I shut the door, and we drive over there. We drive through Toluca Lake. Warner Brothers, Toluca Lake was one of the nicest areas. So we drove by Bing Crosby's house and Bob Hope's house and some of those big stars along there. And I said, one of these days I'm going to own one of these suckers because I've got it made now. And I go over there to the gate. Mr. Hinkle, I hear that again. We got Mr. Hinkle here to see Mr. Hudson. Yes, sir, take him down to 27. So Mr. Hudson's waiting for him. We drive down there, and now then, I got to thinking, now the reason he come running around there, he's supposed to open the door for me. So I sat there in the car and let him come around there and open the door, and I get out, and then he opened the door at the sound stage. Assistant director met us there. He shook hands, and he come on in, and they told Rock I was there. They shut down the production for a few minutes, give them a break. And I'm looking around trying to, see which one of them Rock Hudson. And I don't see him, I don't recognize him. And here comes a guy with a military uniform on, walking over here like this. And it was Rock. And he comes over and shakes hand. We go in his dressing room, and he said, read this here. And I read this one, and we talked a little bit about the accents. And I didn't know nothing about how to teach anybody an accent. But I picked up some things from him. He said, he says, I see you're dropping the G's when you're saying there, he's, where are you going? And things like that. He says, you're kind of bearing down on the R's, like father and mother and things like that. I said, yeah, yeah, you got it. So he gets on the phone, he calls George Stevens. I said, boy, this would be great, George. So George said, send Bob back over here. So I get in that limo again, this time back over there, and George says, we talked a little bit about this. He said, you better go down to, what do they call it, where you sign up? Anyway.
Payroll.
What?
Payroll.
Yeah, says, you've been on a payroll all day. He says, go down there. He said, how much money do you get when you act? I said, well, I got $500 over there for a week over there when I was over to Paramount. He said, that's what I'm going to give you, so I'm going to give you $500 a week. I did get $500, but it was only for 1 week, and I had to do 2 or 3 stunts to get it. But anyway, he put me on salary, and I ended up being on it 7.5 months. And that's how I got on Giant, and that's when I met James Dean, and then I really decided that, well, now he'll be better at a jet rink than I would.
Bob, tell us a little bit about James Dean. I know that you and him became really good friends.
Yeah, I'd been over there, I suppose, maybe about 3 weeks. He was shooting Rebel Without a Cause, and I'd seen him over at the restaurant where we ate, and they had a police thing there called a green room, and that's where all of the celebrities eat. and that was to keep the people from going over and asking for autographs and things. When you ate in there, nobody bothered you. And I'd seen him 2 or 3 times over there, and I noticed a couple of times he was kind of looking at me, and I'd kind of cut my eyes out away, and I didn't want to just stare at him, because I'd heard lots of stories about him, being this and being that, and and a lot of things that people didn't know anything about. And then one day, I was sitting there, I had a dressing room there. They fixed me up in Alan Ladd's old dressing room. And I heard a knock on the door. And it was Jimmy, and he come over and he said, I'm Jimmy Dean. He said, can I come in? I said, sure. He come on in, he said, he said, I hear you were working with Rock Hudson for the accent. He said, I'd like to work with you too. He said, I'll be glad to pay you right out of my pocket if you'll work with me. I said, you don't need to do that. I said, you're paying me enough. I'll be glad to work with you. So from that time on, we became buddies. That weekend, we went out and bought him some. I said, first thing you got to do is you got to get you some decent clothes. I said, make you look like a cowboy. If you really want to be a Texan, you ought to be one 24 hours a day. I said, wear the clothes like a Texan does, eat the food the Texans do. I said, the first thing you know, you'll be thinking like they do. And I said, it'll make you acting a lot easier. He said, that's exactly what I want to do. So I took him out there, and they said, what size jeans do you wear? He said, I wear a 32-32. I said, give him a 32-34. He said, no, I wear a 32. I said, no, you want me to help you? You don't want you, when you wear your boots, I said, you want them to be long enough. I said, you want to look like a cowboy. You don't want to walk out there and they'll laugh at you because your pants are too damn short. And he got some boots. I said, there was some Acme boots there. And I said, no, you don't want them Acmes. I said, after about 2 or 3 days, your feet will be hurting you so bad you won't be thinking about acting. You'll be thinking about trying to get them damn boots off. So we got him a pretty decent pair of boots. I think they cost back then probably about $60, $70. You could buy them for $29 or $30. Pretty fair pair of Acmes. But we got him a pretty good, Justin, I think, and Tony Lama was making pretty good boots back in those days. So I got him some made out of kangaroo hide, and they were real nice and soft. And when we started to leave, I got him 2 or 3 shirts and a straw hat. And we go back over there to my office, and I take his straw hat and I take it in and I put it down in the sink and run some hot water all over it. And he said, what are you doing? I said, I'm fixing to fix his hat so you don't look like a damn dude. And so I recrease his hat for him and everything. And I said, I'm going to take these Levi's down there and have them put a crease in them, get them starched for you. He said, they're not dirty. I said, let me get them fixed right. So I go take them down, get them starched up, got his shirts and everything. He comes by, I go pick him up at the laundry, and he comes by there and he looks at that stuff and he puts it all on. His hat, his boots and everything. And we walk over to the set, over where they're shooting Rebel. He wasn't working that afternoon. And they looked at him, and he kind of went in and they had some bull derm in those days. They had a little thing that hang out with a deal on it there. And we walk in there, and all Nick Adams and Natalie Wood and Dennis Hopper and all of them just had a fit over him, thought, oh yeah. He said, this is my everyday stuff now. Well, I started working with him a little bit on this, a little working here and there. And then I get a knock about a week or 2 later on my door, and it's Nick Ray. That's the director. He said, Bob, I need to talk to you. And I said, oh, fine. I thought maybe he's going to give me a part playing a Texan in there on that Rebel Without a Cause. He said, Bob, he said, I hear you've been working with Jimmy on his accent. He says a little of that's kind of coming through now, and he said he's not playing that young juvenile right out of high school. And he said, I'd appreciate if you'd kind of just ease up on him just a little bit till we get this finished. So we did. I told Jimmy about it. We kind of had a laugh. And we ended up being buddies right up to the time he died. I talked to him about noon the day he died, and he died about 4:30 or something that afternoon up in Paso Robles.
Weren't you supposed to ride with him that day?
Yeah, I was supposed to go up there with him, but Rock Hudson was doing some dubbing, doing looping they call it, And I had to stay there and work with him, and I told Jimmy I'd come up the next day. I said, you go ahead and get, you know, he's going to get me a room. And and his dad was going to go with us, and his dad backed out and couldn't go, or wouldn't go. He wasn't getting along too good with his daddy. And I got hold of Bill Hickman, and Bill Hickman, because he wanted me to, my main thing with going up there was I'd driven a car and pulled a stock trailer before, and he had his little Porsche on a little trailer, and he figured I might be better driving that station wagon. He bought a brand new Ford station wagon to pull that trailer with, because I'd already driven it some and backed it up and things like this, and he was having a hard time, and I think that was one of the reasons he wanted me to go. So I knew Bill Hickman could do that, so Bill went along with him and did drive. When he got killed, the day he got killed. And
How did that affect the production of Giant? What happened to the production of Giant after Jimmy died?
Oh, it was awful sad. What happened was Bear Bryant had been out there to the studio a couple of days before, and he gave Chill Wills a couple of tickets to go to the Texas A&M was playing UCLA in the Coliseum, and so he gave Chill a couple of tickets, and Chill asked me, he said, you know, since you didn't go up yonder with Jimmy, he said, you want to go to that football game tonight? And I said, yeah, I'll go to the football game with you. So he says, they gave him a little rocking chair, a little miniature rocking chair, and he wanted to run it home and change clothes, and he's going to come back there to the studio and pick me up when we was going down to the Coliseum. So I was standing out there by the gate waiting on him, and Bill Hendricks pulls in. He was the head of the publicity department, and he rolled down his window and he said, Bob, did you hear the news on Jimmy? And I said, what? He said, he got killed racing his car. And I said, no, he couldn't. I said, his race is not until Sunday. And this was Friday. And he said, no, he said, they called me, the Associated Press called me. He says, he says, get in here and let's go up to the office. So I jump in his car and we pull around there and go up to the office and find out he's got 3 or 4 people there that's already met us there that had already verified that Jimmy had been killed, and we was trying to find out where he was, and so it was in Paso Robles. I'd been up to Paso Robles before, but I said, you know, he was going to Salinas. So I called Paso Robles, and there was a funeral home there, and I called and I asked the guy, I said, do you have an actor there from Hollywood, James Dean, that was killed in an automobile accident? He says, I'm not allowed to give out any information on anything. Well, I knew then that he knew something. Instead of saying no, you know, so I said, is there anybody there from Warner Brothers? He said, well, there's another guy here, his name is Hickman. I said, let me talk to him. So Bill gets on the phone and verifies that Jim is dead. So then I get on the phone and I call over there to to the projection room. They're showing some rushes. George Stevens he's got Liz Taylor and Jane Withers and Carol and Baker and I think Dennis and 2 or 3 more people in there watching these rushes. And I told George, I said, George, I said, I need to come over and see you. I said, we got some bad news. He said, come on. I went over and he shut the thing down. I told him that Jimmy got killed, and I said, he really did. I talked to him. And Liz starts crying, everybody starts crying and carrying on, and her husband, she was married to Mike Wall, and he was on his way over there, and Mike came over, and Mike and I jumped, we went up and went over to see Jimmy's house to see, he had a little cat over there called Marcus, and anyway, we went over there and checked it out, and I stayed over about till midnight, I think, with Elizabeth walking around. She just kept crying, and then I was trying to get her to shut up, then I'd start crying, and it was kind of a sad night, you know.
And you worked on HUD with Paul Newman. Tell us about that.
Well, I got a call one time. I was a grand marshal down in a place called Wichita Falls, Texas, at a rodeo. I had my wife and my 3 children down there with me, and I get a phone call, and the guy says, is this Bob Hinkle? And I said, yeah. He said, this is Paul Newman. And I thought, yeah, shit, you know. Anyway, and when he talked a little bit, I thought, well, maybe it is him. He says, I'm getting ready to do a picture down in Texas, right in Amarillo. He says, and I'm playing a Texan, and I want you to work with me like you did Jimmy, and help me be a Texan. He said, are you interested? And I said, I sure am. He said, well, day after tomorrow, let's see, I think this was the next day after the rodeo. The rodeo ended on Saturday night, I believe, and this was like on a Sunday. And he said, we're going to be in Amarillo on Wednesday. He says, can you meet me there in Amarillo? He said, where are you at? And I told him Wichita Falls. He said, is that very far from Amarillo? I said, no, a couple of 100 miles, I think. He said, meet me there Wednesday if you can. He said, go there and check in at the Holiday Inn. I mean the Ramada Inn. He says, we've got rooms there. And said, we'll call down and make sure that they got a room for you. So I'll go down. Here they come, and Sandra and I were sitting in the room. We're wondering, you know, it's not wondering, are you going to take the deal? It's just, you know, I wanted the deal. Anyway, he comes in, he knocks on her door, and he comes in, introduces himself, and they get somebody there at the motel to stay with our kids. They take my wife and I out for dinner. We eat dinner, and we make a deal, which wasn't really hard to do. I didn't try to hold out too much. And we made the deal, and I ended up working with him on HUD.
Yeah, you played the rodeo announcer. Tell us about the pig race.
Well, when I got on HUD, I went on that as a dialogue director again. And knowing me, you know, I'm kind of full of BS, and I'm trying to help out every way I can to do everything that I can do. And I've helped them out 2 or 3 different little ideas about, you know, this and that. One of them was not, I told him, I said, he wouldn't drink 4 Roses whiskey, he drank Black Jack Daniels. And he carried a half pint in his back pocket, always, you know, Black Jack Daniels. So I got him a deal with Jack Daniels. So anyway, the director and the writer came over to my room one night, and they said, Bob says, we've got a problem. I said, what's the deal? They said, well, he says, you know that scene in there where we got the softball game where Paul hits a home run in the 7th inning and wins the ball game? And I said, yeah. He said, what do you think about that scene? Well, I've seen it about a dozen times in movies. I said, it's predictable. We know what's going to happen, that Paul's going to do it. He said, that's what we think too. And says, is there anything you could think of that we might could do back in Hollywood and substitute it for this? And I said, yeah, we could do a pig scramble back there. And he said, what's a pig scramble? I said, well, that's where you turn a bunch of greased pigs out in the arena, and then we used to run a bunch of kids out there to chase them pigs. But I said, what I would do is I'd get about 20 stunt men. And I said, I'd put about them pigs out there, and I'd have them guys falling and fighting over them where you got a lot of action. And I said, and I've never seen that in a movie. They said, that's a hell of an idea. Says, can you put that down on paper a little bit? And I said, yeah. I'd written a couple of things myself. So I'd go over and get a typewriter, and I just take the script. I start with the scene numbers here, and I type it right to the same amount of pages and the same amount of scene numbers, and hand it to him the next day. He said, I'll be damned. He said, we can put this right, just put it right in there. He said, let's do it. So we went back, so now we get out to Hollywood, and they said, Bob, you're going to play the announcer. And since I'd written the part, I knew it pretty well. And so when we get out there to do it, we go out, and before we do it, they said, Bob, we need to have a dress rehearsal on this. Says, we'd like to have you get your cowboys out here. Says, only bring about 10 of them out. We'll pay them just like they're working. So we'll give them 100 a day just to come out here and just kind of show us what they're going to do. And we won't put the grease on the pigs or nothing, but I just want to kind of see some of the little things they'll do. So I got a hold of 10 of my buddies, brought them out there, gave them a call. They came out there to a place called a Pickwick there on Riverside there, and it was one of the reasons he went. And they thought, this is great. So okay, we get it set. Then we find a little a guy has a little stables there where he rents maybe 8 or 10 head of horses to a bunch of dudes. And it's kind of a country looking, kind of a ratty looking place. So that's what we decided to use, the little arena is. So the director, Martin Ritt, he said, Bob, he said, you wrote this. He says, you're going to direct it. He says, you get it set up. And he said, I'm going to go out here and listen to the Dodgers play. And when you get it set up, bring me in and says, take a look at it. And he says, then we'll do it. I said, okay. I brought 20 of my buddies in there. And I heard one of them say, boy, look at old Hinkle, that son of a bitch is in charge here. You know, and after I did the announcing, you know, things, we did this after I did my little part. Another one, that old Wag Blessing, he was a world champion bull rider. He said, you know, Hinkle's been a damn announcer than old Lex Conley is. And, you know, he was one of the rodeo announcers. Anyway, I got all of them in there like this, and I got them all set up and put the camera over here on that. We had a big crane, one of them, I forget what the hell kind they call it, a Chapman crane. Yeah. Put a camera on that and raised it up here, and I said, get it where you can establish the entire arena, where you can see the pigs up here like this and the cowboys over here. And I says, then we're going to have them come right together in the middle of the deal. And I says, then Marty will come out here and say, we'll just make he'll do all of the cuts and all the close-ups and the things like that. I says, and we'll have right here, this part here, I said, this is not the audience. I said, this is for the contestants area. I said, that's where we'll put his dad and his nephew and that Patricia Neal. Set them in there where you've only got just 2 or 3 or 4 people around them. That way you don't have to worry about a lot of matching stuff. And I said, then you take that other 100 of extras over here and you can just shoot them at will. So we get everything set up like this, and I called Marty out there, and he said, well, it looks pretty good. He said, let's do it, Bob. He said, tell him. I said, what? He said, action. He said, hell. I said, stand by, everybody. Roll that sound in the cameras. Y'all ready? Action. And boy, they come and went together like this, and we did that long shot and did it like that. Then Marty Ritt came in and said, boy, that's great, Bob. Then he went in and did close-ups of this and that and catching those pigs. And these old boys made about $300 or $400 a piece that night and were tickled to death. And I was glad to help them out, you know. And that was, you know, that was another experience for me, man, working on there with, you know, with people like that. That old boy from West Texas without any credentials. Look at him, Bobby Hinkle. God damn, you're doing all right.
Bob, you've been the manager of some pretty famous people. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, the first one was an old boy named Chill Wills. Buckle, let's go to Texas. Tell Sandy, you know, we got to go down, you know, my manager, you got to go down there and we got to get some good barbecue. And so Chill Wills, I worked with him. Never had anything signed except, well, I didn't ever have a contract with anybody. After that, I worked with a guy named Marty Robbins. You know, country singer. Y'all remember Marty Robbins?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then there's a young kid a young guy, good-looking boy, came in my office one day and says, I want you to help make my name as big as Elvis Presley's. I said, what the hell do you do? He said, I jump motorcycles. I said, what do you jump them over? He said, rattlesnakes, pickup trucks, anything. He said, people will pay to come see that. I said, really? Yeah. His name was Robert Knievel. Ended up being Evil Knievel. And so we ended up making a movie, and I worked with him right up to the last thing I did with him. We did a special up in his hometown, up in Butte, Montana. That was in July, and he died in November that year. And that was a pretty good experience. Then I was doing a thing, I was under contract over for Paramount doing some short subjects. And I had a young singer over named Glenn Campbell, and I did I did 6 specials with him and Jeannie Seeley and Henson Cargill, Delaney Bramlett, and called Hollywood Jamboree. And I was lucky again, find an old boy like Glenn Campbell. Poor old Glenn just did his last concert last Saturday night. He's got Alzheimer's now. They said he had a hard time remembering the lyrics to his hits. And they said it was pitiful, you know, to see him go out like that.
And you directed a couple of pictures too. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, I did a deal with called Country Music with starring Marty Robbins. It was for Universal Studios. And Sammy Jackson. Sammy Jackson was, you remember, he was in a series called No Time for Sergeants.
Yeah.
And he was a disc jockey at the time, and did the thing. And we used a lot of the top stars at that time in this thing called Country Music. And then I did a Western with starring him and Chill Wills called Guns of a Stranger. My daughter was in that. She was also in Helter Skelter. Y'all remember Helter Skelter?
Yeah.
She played one of the Manson girls in that.
Well,
She was mean. I went out there to see her, and they put her in handcuffs and was taking her butt to jail.
well Bob, you might your lovely wife Sandra's here. Your
Yeah.
daughter's here.
Rodeo Queen, 19 and 50.
The only girl he said was better looking than Liz Taylor.
That's she was. Well, she still is a good-looking woman.
Yes, she is.
Good cook, good mother. Got a good daughter. That's my second daughter right there. She's married to my son Brad. That's Marlinda Hinkle. And let's give a hand to Jody here.
Jody Stelzy.
Yeah, one of the top stuntmen in the business. She's going to be one of the young directors too.
Anybody have any questions for Bob?
The pig thing, what did you call it? Pig shuffle?
Scramble.
Scramble. Is that a common thing? I've never heard of it.
Well,
Calf scramble. You know, you've been to a rodeo and seen a calf scramble?
Not since I was really young.
You need to go to a rodeo.
That's probably the reason I don't know about it.
yeah, they do it with kids.
Pig scramble?
Pig scrambles, right.
And it's a fairly well-known thing?
Yeah,
In rodeos especially.
at rodeos. Yeah, it's the only place I've ever seen it except in HUD.
Your contribution back then?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Talk about your experiences with LBJ.
Pardon me?
LBJ.
Oh, LBJ. First time I met him, I was down a picture they was shooting. John Wayne was shooting a picture called The Alamo down in Bracketville, and I was down there visiting Chill Wills and Big John Hamilton. And there was a senator. They said there's a senator coming out here today with the brother of the governor. And I said, what's his name? He said, Lyndon Johnson, and the brother is Bill Daniels. It was Price Daniels' brother. They came out there, and old Chill walks in the room. He found out where Chill was staying. Chill, they put Chill in a big room. It's damn near as big as this room right here. I think it was out at that old fort, but it was like a meeting room, and Big John stayed in there with him, but they just had a lot of extra room. So here comes old Lyndon Johnson in, and his first thing he says, I hope you boys ain't drank all the whiskey. We come in and we did. Chill had some whiskey, and we gave him some whiskey. And he said, let's go over to Mexico and get some of that good Mexican food. We went over to Del Rio and ate Mexican food. And then the next time I saw him, we was out there at the Ambassador Hotel there in Los Angeles, and they was having the Democratic Convention in 1960. This is in the fall of *59, and it wasn't too long after, right after they did Alamo, and Lyndon Johnson was running for president, and so was John Kennedy, and they were right out there to decide at that convention which one of them they was going to have run for president. So we was down in Lyndon's suite. I know Chill was there, and there was 2 or 3 other people there. I can't remember who all was there. Anyway, Lyndon, they was coming down, and Bobby Kennedy come down there, and he said, Jack wants to talk to you. And I didn't know who the hell Jack was. And that was John Kennedy, John F. Kennedy. I guess they called him Jack. Anyway, Lyndon leaves and goes upstairs, and he comes back in about 30 or 40 minutes, and he said, boys, he said, I just made a deal with John Kennedy. He says, I'm going to be his vice president. And then we said, oh man, we want to get you in there as president. And anyway, they went ahead and they was elected. And then Next time I saw him was I shooting a little deal down here in Austin with a guy named Dean Smith. He was an All-American track man, played football, got a gold medal in 1948 in the Olympics in Helsinki. And I was doing a short subject on him, and we was on our way back to California, and I had a couple of, had a cameraman, Leslie Kovacs, and his assistant. I can't think of his assistant's name.
Sigmund.
Who?
Sigmund.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, he must have looked this up on the...
He
Read your book.
Yeah, loved your book.
Anyway, we stopped, they said, you know Lyndon Johnson, don't you? I said, yeah, I met him. They said, why don't we go by his ranch?
Maybe you can introduce us.
I said, yeah, we will. So we get on 290 or whatever it is, 190, and take off out through here to Johnson City, and then on out there to Stonewell. And there's a deal out there, right there by the river, a gate with some guys in there, and you know, like going into a movie studio. So we pull in there. And I said, is the president here? He said, let me see your driver's license. And I wanted to tell him he wants to see my driver's license. First I showed him that. He goes inside. He gets on the telephone. And I see him nodding, and he was talking in there, and he comes back out there. He said, get out of the car. All you guys get out of the car. Take everything out of your pockets and put them up there on the hood of this. We was driving a station wagon. Put them up there on the hood of the thing. And I thought, well, damn, you know. We're fixing to get arrested, something like they think we're going to kill somebody. So we take everything out of our pockets and lay them up there, and they're going through that and let us put our billfold back and the keys and things. And he says, get in this Suburban here, said the president wants to see you. So we get in and we go up there, and he was sitting out there on the porch. He had a big long porch at that old big white house of his. He said, hey Bob, how you doing? He said, when's the last time you seen old Chill? They looked at each other and said, by damn, he does know. I guess he does know it. So anyway, we sat around there and we talked. We said, y'all give you, he said, y'all want something to drink? So I'm going to give you some iced tea. So I'd give you something a little stronger, but I don't want y'all to be picked up out there for drunk driving and then tell that highway patrol that the president gave you that. So anyway, he said, I asked him, I said, well, where do you bring that big airplane in here when you come in? He said, we got a strip back there. He says, come on, I want to take you on a tour. And he said, so we got into a white town car, one of them four-door town cars. He was driving, and I was sitting over here in this seat, and my two brothers were in the back seat, and the Secret Service was behind us in a black Suburban. So he takes us down this dirt road over here, and he shows me where this is, and the landing lights and everything for this. And he says, I want to show you some cattle. He said, do you see these cattle right here? He said, these just come off the King Ranch. It's a new breed. It's that Santa Trugas, or what do you call it? Yeah. And he's telling me about them. And he says, I don't know about you boys, but I got to piss. So we said, yeah, okay. So we get out, and he just unzips, sitting there talking, and we're talking like this. So we unzipped too. One old boy sat there, and he was draining. He couldn't pee. He was trying. I know, just go there. And he's just talking to us like this, you know, and he zipped up. We got in the car and left. And that was Lyndon Johnson. I mean, he just... And then I got to see him in New York. I went back to New York. I was working Paramount and shooting some short subjects. And I took him back there, so I came back to Washington, D.C., and he happened to be there. And I called down and asked him if I could get up there to see him, and he let me come up there. And I went in his office and sat down in that. He had two little couches that I think sat two people and two people over there, and then he had a chair sitting right there at the end. I guess he only got 4 people in there at a time to talk to. But anyway, he'd come over and he pulled his shoes off, and he was scratching his feet and talking to me, you know. We just sat there and shot the breeze, you know. And that was the Lyndon Johnson.
Well, yeah, as a side to that, I was producing a show called The Garden Editor. A guy named Ed Bryce was the host of. And he called us up one day and said, we're going to do a road trip. We're going to go down to Lyndon's Ranch. And so I packed up my director and my camera and everything. We went out there, and of course all the Secret Service guys were over here, and then you look next time they'd be over there. But we went in, Lady Bird was a very gracious lady. She came in there and she said, okay, what I want you to do is put up all your equipment in Lyndon's den. I haven't changed a thing in there. You can go in there and look around and everything. And one thing that struck me was on the couch, there was a pillow there that was embroidered, and it says, "This is my ranch, and I'll damn well do what I please."
Yeah.
That was Lyndon.
Yeah, that was him. Remember that time he had an operation, and they had everybody out there, and he just pulled his shirt up like that, showed his belly, and they had some dogs. He had some dogs there. He said, "Yeah, they won't hound dogs." He just got that one by the ears and lifted him plumb up off of the ground. There's humane people got on him about that.
Made history.
Oh yeah. So if y'all read, my daughter said at college she took a course on something to Lyndon Johnson, and she kind of enjoyed looking at some of those stories about Lyndon. There is some good ones about him, I'll tell you that. Anybody else have a question?
Anybody? Well, just remember that Bob's going to be at the Paramount September the 1st. That's a Thursday night. And also, he wrote a book called Call Me Lucky, A Texan in Hollywood.
Wild horses. Well, there's a scene out there where Clark Gable and Montgomery Cliff are riding in the back of a pickup, and they run that pickup there close to a horse, and they had that rope tied to an old caisson. And they'd rope that damn horse, and they'd throw that tar off, and then that horse would pull it, and finally the horse would stop, and then they'd go out there and catch the horse and load him up. And I did the roping for Clark Gable in there, off the back of a pickup truck.
And how'd you do your book?
Do what?
How'd you write your book? I'm just curious.
Well, I used to go to a lot of film festivals and things, and I'd get up there and I'd tell different stories about Chill Wills or Evel Knievel or Marty Robbins or some of the people that I worked with, and two or three people, and Robert Wagner was one of them that told me, said, "Why don't you put this down in a book?" I used to have a lot of sayings, you know, that I used. I can't even think of one of them right now. Well, you know, like you see somebody looks kind of strange, said, "Looks like he's been slapped away from the table for farting." You know, and things like that, you know. But I had a lot of little things and they said, put it in, you know, to a book. So finally I got to thinking about it. I got to thinking about, you know, hell, from an old boy from West Texas, and to be as lucky as I was to do all these things, it might be interesting to somebody. So my wife and I was at a deal out in Dallas, where they had me out, and I was talking about two movies made in Texas, Giant and HUD. They had tables. People had to pay like $500 or something because it was for the SMU film, SMU library. It was a lot of rich people go and just contribute money for the library. And I had a table there with 10 people around it, and we would ask questions. They'd ask questions about this and that, about movies. And there was a lady, she'd come up to me, and she said, "My husband here says he's got a table over there, says he's written a book about the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And his name was Ainsworth. I can't think of his first name." What? Bill. Yeah, Ainsworth. Anyway, his wife sat at my table. I said, "Man, I'd like to be at his table and listening to his stuff." Well, he said, after it was over, he came over and said, "I'd like to be at your table and heard some of your stories." So his wife says, "Why don't you write a book?" And I said, "Well, I thought about it." She said, and then I thought, well, you know, maybe I could get him to help me do this book. So she said, "I know a guy," said he writes books, says he worked with her husband before, and his name was Ferris, Mike Ferris. And so she put me in contact with Mike Fresh. She called Mike Fresh and said, Mike, says, you got to get with this guy. Said, he's got a lot of stories. Says, I think there's a book there. So he got with him, and then we started working. I just took a tape recorder. I went over there to Radio Shack, bought me a little tape recorder, and I just said, well, let's see, July the 25th, 1946. That's my birthday. I'm 16 years old, and I get my pilot license today. Now, when I got my pilot license, I did it, and I start telling the story about the first day I get my pilot license, and I get grounded because I go out there and do a lot of stuff that's scary that you're not supposed to do with 7 or 8 hours of experience. And I get grounded the first day, so that's the way I started. I put that down, and then I left high school, I went into the Air Force, I went overseas, and we were flying coal into Germany in C-47s, and they weren't big enough, so they put some C-54s in there, and I was a crew chief on there, and we would bring that coal in there, and then we'd unload it, and they'd make us turn right around and leave. And I just started doing that, you know, on tapes, and I'd give them to him, and then he'd type them all up. And then I worked in a movie with Joel McRae, and it was called, let me see, I believe it was Bat Masterson or something. Well, he'd look it up on the internet and see exactly who it was, what year we did it, when it was released, and who the other stars was on it. He did all the research, and he'd send it back to me, and I said, yeah, that's it. And we just kept doing it, and we would meet, and I'd give him these tapes, and he'd bring them back to me, and I sent it to a friend of mine out there that has a Cowboy Symposium out there in Lubbock, and I wanted him to read it because we had sent it to Texas Tech, and Texas Tech said, yeah, we're interested. I know who he is. He's from Brownfield down here. Says, we're getting ready to change the director. And says, we're not going to do anything until we do that, and that's about 60 days away. So I said, I'm going to send this out there to Alvin, and then because he used to teach there at Texas Tech, and he's got some pull. Maybe he'll show it to him, or I'll get him to show it to him if he likes it. But when he gets the book, he read it, the manuscript, he read it. He said, who have you sent this to? And I told him Texas Tech. He said, I've got an idea. He said, would you let me send it to somebody? So I don't even want to tell you who it is till I find out if they're interested. So I said, yeah. He sends it up to Oklahoma Press, and the guy that's up there, his name is Byron Price. I'd known him all of his life. I knew his dad. His dad had a big Western store there in Lubbock, and Bill Price. And he sent it up there, and Byron read it. He said, yeah, I know who this guy is. He said, we'll do a book on him. So Mike calls us and said, Bob, we got a book deal. And I said, wow. So they sent us a contract, we signed it, and that's the way that book came about. And then it was put out in September, the last of September, I think, was it last year? Year before. Yeah. And
when did you start working on it?
oh, it took us, let me see now, Mike used to tell that story. It seems like we started in February, and we turned then the book came out the first week in September. And they said, that's unbelievable. Says no book's ever put out in under a year. But they wanted to get it out in a hurry because they're having a big thing for me down at that Cowboy Symposium, which draws around 20 or 30,000 people. And I was one of their guests there, and they wanted to get the book down there. Oklahoma Press went in there with a great big deal set up. I mean, they had it was like it was in Neiman Marcus. It was really nice. And had a book signing for me. And then I went out to Barnes & Noble's, and they had a big deal out there for me and signing. And it's from close to my hometown. So they figured we'll sell some books. So I think they sold enough books to pay for it right there at the first signing, you know. Because the way they talked, I know we sold several of them. They brought several boxes of them in there, and they didn't, I don't think we had but a dozen when they left. Yes, sir.
Talk about Jimmy and roping.
What?
Didn't you? Jimmy and the roping.
Oh, the rope trick? You know, my daughter wanted me to bring that rope in here for y'all. And I said, oh, ain't nobody gonna be interested in that. But it's out there in my car.
Yeah,
Go get it.
yeah. Want to see a rope
Well,
trick, folks?
talk about it while she's getting the rope.
You remember you made me one of those ropes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I made a lot of them.
Well, tell about Jimmy and the ropes.
Well, the way that came about, Monty Hale had come out on the set one day, and he had tied a bunch of knots with a rock in it, and a little cotton rope about 20 foot long, and he was swinging it like this, about 10 foot of it out there, and he'd do like that, and a knot went right through a loop, made a knot. And I said, "Damn, how did you do that, Monty?" And I saw him do it, and he threw a half hitch. Well, I knew what a half hitch was because I roped, and I knew how to handle a rope. So I said, "Sure, let me see that a minute." And I took it and I went about 3 or 4 times like this, and then I popped a knot in it. Monty had never seen one go like that. So Jimmy says, "Well, I want you to teach me how to do that." So Monty took the credit for it. Said, "Well, I taught Jimmy Dean how to do it." I stood behind him and I took his hand and I went like this with him and like this with him. And I went in with old Chill Wills, took my hat and says, "George Stevens liked the way I put my hat on." And he said, "That's why he gave me the part," which was BS. Chill Wills got him the part. And I ended up spending a damn week with Jimmy teaching him this deal with that little old rope.
All right.
And this is it, folks. I think I can do it sitting down. Ooh. Somebody's been...
Oh,
So now, what happened with this is Jimmy had a scene in the picture. Y'all remember the picture, Giant? Mm-hmm. But you remember when Mercedes McCambridge dies and they have her in there and they have her funeral? Then Rock and them calls him in and going to make a deal because she gave him a little piece of land on the ranch. So Jimmy said, "Boy," he said, "I don't know what the hell I'm going to do in this scene." He said, "I don't have any dialogue." He said, "I got a couple of off-stage grunts." And he said, "But Rock Hudson has all the good dialogue." And said, "I don't know what the hell to do." I said, "Take that little rope of yours in there." I says, "When no Rock's working with you," I says, "sit there and mess with it." And I said, "Look at Rock." And he said, "Uh-huh." And yeah, she's a nice woman. I said, "Just sit there and mess that sucker." I said, "Then when you finish," I said, "we know you're not going to take the deal." I said, "Just walk over there at the gate, over at the door, and just kind of just put that rope down there like that and just